At the beginning of the story, we see a girl running through the forest in a desperate, frantic state. She was terrified. Her condition was dire. She crashed into a tree trunk, fell onto a rock, and began crying. Just then, someone grabbed her and dragged her away into the darkness. We then shift to a group of 6 friends making their way through the forest, searching for a location. A girl named Mia was holding an old map. They had heard rumors that a school once existed in this area but had mysteriously disappeared, and their curiosity had driven them to find it. They were already out of breath from searching when another friend, Matt, caught up with them. Then their female lead, Jane, arrived and asked, "Have we arrived yet? When I made the plan, I used GPS, not some ancient map." Mia insisted that the map was original and that they were almost there. They pressed on. Jane asked where exactly they were headed, and Matt teased her, saying, "Why is our great Jane Madam so scared? Aren't you the same girl who once kicked a boy for bothering me?" Jane laughed and asked if he still remembered that. Matt said he remembered everything she had ever said, which, if you think about it, is either very sweet or mildly alarming. After walking for a long time, a boy named Jerome asked how much longer it would take to reach Hell University, adding that the place was said to be extremely haunted. Mia checked the map and confirmed they should be approaching the university gate. Sure enough, a gate appeared before them with the words Hell University written on it. Jane immediately said she felt uneasy and that nothing felt right, suggesting they turn back. But Mia protested that they had walked so far and worked so hard to get here. The others agreed they should at least look around first. One of them called out to see if anyone was present, but receiving no response, they were about to leave. Suddenly, they heard the sound of the gate and jumped in fright. An old man appeared and asked what they were doing there. Jerome asked if he was the caretaker. The man seemed surprised and asked what had brought them to this place. Matt explained that they had all gotten lost while hiking in the mountains and had stumbled upon what appeared to be an abandoned school in the middle of the forest. Jerome asked if they could have some water. The man opened the gate and invited everyone inside, but warned them firmly, "This is not an abandoned school, by any means." One of them asked if that meant there were still students here. The man said nothing more and simply directed them inside. Jane was too frightened to enter, but Matt urged everyone to go in quickly, reminding them they needed to leave before sunset. As they entered, the old man called after them, "Remember, this university changes after 7. None of them understood what that meant. Inside, the man informed them they would need to register first. Matt protested that they had simply gotten lost and had not come to enroll. Jerome, ever the comedian, suggested they register anyway, joking that even if they skipped class, at least their parents wouldn't be notified. A compelling argument, honestly. The students around them stared with eerie, frightened expressions. When a group of students suddenly came running toward them, apparently fighting among themselves, the 6 friends screamed in alarm. The old man reassured them it was just a joke and not to take it seriously. Jane, understandably unconvinced, asked why nobody was stopping them. The man said all their questions would be answered inside. Jerome, meanwhile, was deeply concerned about one critical matter, whether there was Wi-Fi. To be fair, some people had their priorities. They were taken to the headmistress's office, where the principal introduced herself. "I am Madam Violet, headmistress of Hell University." Jane immediately raised the issue of the chaos happening outside. Madam Violet waved it off, saying it was routine. The PN, a man named Francisco, handed them documents to fill out. Mia asked about the tuition fees. Madam Violet and Francisco both laughed and said everything here was completely free. Matt asked if it was a public university. She clarified it was private, but unlike any conventional university. Jane pressed for details. Madam Violet explained that from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., the period known as Bloody Night was in effect, during which killing someone was permitted. She strongly advised them to stay in their rooms, lock their doors, and not go outside, as anyone who did might not return alive. Maid said this had to be some kind of joke. Then he noticed the weapon in Francisco's hand and quickly retracted that statement. Jane urged everyone to leave immediately, calling the situation absolutely insane. But Vanessa stopped them, saying this was exactly the kind of adventure she had been looking for, which, in retrospect, is a sentence that should have raised several red flags. She also pointed out that spending the night outside in the forest would be even more dangerous. Madam Violet then instructed Francisco to take them all to their rooms, and she told Jane quietly that being afraid was actually a good thing, because only those who are afraid can survive in this place. She warned Jane that at some point even her friends might not be trustworthy, and to never let her guard down. They were brought to the student hostel and began choosing their rooms. Mad noticed that Jane Jane seemed distant and asked what was wrong. Jane said she missed her sister Allison. Matt told her to relax and reminded her that everything here was free, including accommodation. Jane said she had a bad feeling about the place and that what Madame Violet had said was anything but normal. Killing someone was legal here. Matt suggested they might have just said it to frighten them and that it would be best to follow the rules for now. He told Jane not to worry, that the boys were there to protect her, and asked her to rest. Matt left, but Jane could not stay still. She wandered out and began exploring the campus, muttering to herself that her old school had already felt like a hellhole, so this was familiar territory. She noticed how unusually quiet it was and where all the students had gone. She found a park signboard but saw nothing but forest beyond it. She sat on a swing. Then, without warning, a masked figure dropped down from above. Jane noticed his hand was bleeding and asked if he was all right. The boy said calmly that it was not his blood, then asked her name. When she told him, he said she seemed like a good person, but that she would soon need a knife to survive here. He threw a knife into the ground to illustrate his point. Jane asked in fear who he was. He said he was not her friend and that nobody here was like her, but he would let her go this time because it was only 6:30 and she still had half an hour before things got dangerous. He told her to go to her room and lock every door, warning her that her friends were already being watched. He then disappeared. Jane ran back in a panic. Meanwhile, the rest of the group were discussing how their families were probably not even worried about them, assuming they were out at some party. Then Vanessa suddenly screamed, only for everyone to discover she was screaming because there was no Wi-Fi, no phone signal either. She insisted her Instagram followers might be waiting for her. One might argue there are worse things than a missed story update, but Vanessa clearly disagreed. Mia calmly suggested they speak to the administration the next day. Then Jane returned and warned everyone that she had made a serious mistake coming here and that none of it was funny. The others dismissed her concerns, suggesting the masked boy had simply been playing with her. Then at exactly 7 o'clock, an alarm sounded. Bloody night had begun. Through the windows, they could see people hacking at each other and running in chaos. They quickly barricaded the door with a table and held each other in terror. When the noise eventually died down, they looked outside and saw a student lying dead. Jane declared that in the morning they would find a way out. The next morning, they went straight to Madame Violet and demanded to leave. She asked what their problem was. Jane said the university was completely illegal and demanded to know why the government had not intervened. Madame Violet explained that the university was beyond the government's reach and that no authority could ever find them. They shouted that they wanted to leave immediately. Violet calmly told them the rules. Once you enter, there is no option to go back. Matt demanded to be let go. Violet refused, saying they had entered of their own free will and must now face the consequences. Jerome began shouting and threatened to call the police. Violet smiled and said they were welcome to try if they could find a way out first. She then told them to stop complaining, put on their uniforms, and get to class. Vanessa shouted in disbelief that they were expected to study here. Madame Violet replied that Hell University was still a school and that its teachers were among the best, earning double or even triple normal salaries. She warned them not to be late, or the school's student government president would make things very uncomfortable for them. When they reached the washroom, they huddled together and began asking each other how they would possibly escape and whether escape was even possible. Just then, a girl appeared and introduced herself as Nikki. She told them she had heard that 6 rats had wandered in. She offered them a tip if anyone tried to grab them, cut their hand off, because kindness was a luxury in this place. She said if she were them, she would walk alone, as trusting anyone here was a mistake. Vanessa shot back confidently that they would find their way out. Nikki laughed and asked if they really believed that, adding that if they ever found an exit, they should let her know too. Jane asked why she did not know how to escape herself. Nikki reminded them that once you enter this place, there is no leaving, and with that she walked away. Jane and Jerome then attended a class, and Jane was surprised to find that things inside seemed relatively normal. She took a seat near Nikki and noticed a girl beside her who was drawing. Jane asked if she liked manga, which immediately triggered the girl's anger. A fight broke out in the back rows, and soon the whole class erupted in chaos, until the teacher walked in and restored order. The teacher asked the new students to introduce themselves, and as they did, paper began flying at them from all directions. The teacher intervened again and resumed the lesson on the topic of Amrit, a mythical potion of immortality that, according to legend, could prevent death entirely. For years, people had searched for it and some had died in the attempt, yet no one had ever succeeded. Over time, the idea had faded from memory. After class, they heard a girl scream and rushed out. Meanwhile, we see Mia being bumped into by a boy with red hair, who then vanished inexplicably. A moment later, Mia saw a hanging body in the school grounds and screamed in horror. Jane heard the scream and recognized it as Mia's voice. Back with Mia, Jane learned from another student that there were 2 powerful gangs in the school, one called the Black Gang and the other called the Devil God. The nail inserted into the dead boy's boy's throat was the Black Gang's calling card, and the dead boy was the younger brother of Ray Sylvania, leader of the Devil God Gang. Another war between the two factions was apparently inevitable. Jane was urged to stay out of it. Then their class teacher arrived late, and Nikki immediately called her out for it, warning her that Supreme despised tardiness. Jane wondered privately who this Supreme was, and why Nikki seemed to hold so much authority. The teacher apologized to Nikki and began the lesson, but Nikki kept staring at Jane. When Jane stayed silent, Nikki grabbed her cheek and demanded to know if she understood everything. Jane said no, but that she would find out on her own. Nikki laughed and said Jane's curiosity would ultimately be her downfall, but if she truly wanted the truth, she would have to seek it herself, or break the rules. Jane told her to leave her alone. Nikki threw her chewing gum at her and warned that if she did not want to die soon, she should follow the rules and keep quiet. When Jane pushed back, Nikki moved to strike her with a pen, but Jane deflected it. Nikki smiled, said she was actually impressed by Jane's courage, and told her she had her attention. Later, outside class, everyone was talking about the blood they had seen throughout the school grounds. Mia kept asking about the red-haired boy, but no one else had seen him. The group also noticed Jane had not shown up to their meeting point. We see that Jane had been following Nikki, but Nikki realized this, hid, and ambushed her from behind, pressing a blade to her and asking if she was ready to die. She introduced herself as Nikki Cold and warned Jane never to follow her again. She then left. Back with the group, Matt was visibly worried about Jane, more so than the situation perhaps strictly required. Vanessa told him to calm down and stop overthinking. Matt insisted he was simply concerned and went off to find Jane. Mia dragged him back to class before he could break any more rules. Dave then suggested that instead of hiding in the hostel that night, they face things head-on. Mia called him insane, but Jerome agreed with Dave, saying they could not keep hiding forever. Vanessa overruled them all with a firm "safety first" and marched everyone back to the hostel, but they still had no idea where Jane was. Jane, alone outside, was approached by a boy who asked why she was not in class. When he startled her with a sudden noise, she snapped at him. He grabbed her wrist and warned her that if he saw her outside during class time again, he would break her hand. As he let go, Jane asked who he was. He told her his name was S, the Supreme Student Government President. Jane thought to herself, so this is the Supreme that Nikki was talking about. When she was later found by her teacher, it became clear that where S had grabbed her wrist, the skin was burned and blistered, which explained her earlier cries of pain. The teacher saw it, gave her a first aid kit, and warned her that this was her first warning and that the second punishment would be far more severe. Div asked who had done it. The teacher said it was Supreme, meaning Jane had broken a rule and was fortunate the punishment had not been worse. Matt immediately said that next time, Jane would not be going anywhere alone. Jane reflected that this school was full of secrets, and that one wrong move could put all of them in danger. She would need to be careful, but if she did nothing, how would they ever escape? She then noticed Matt speaking quietly with some unfamiliar boys, and asked what that was about. Matt said it was nothing. Meanwhile, S was receiving a report from his secretary Freezy and his vice president, Anil, about the previous night's events. 10 to 15 students had been killed, and Bridges, Sylvania's younger brother, was among the dead. Anil also reported on the 6 new students, noting that one girl in particular stood out. A girl named Jane, who had been wandering the campus during Bloody Night, had missed class and appeared unusually bold. S told them to investigate Jane and find out everything about her. Anil asked why. S told them to just do it and stop asking questions. Later, when Jane announced she needed to use the bathroom at 6:20 p.m., her friends reacted as if she had just proposed skydiving without a parachute. She rolled her eyes and reminded them she just needed to go to the bathroom and would be back quickly. Matt insisted on accompanying her. Nikki appeared in the corridor and warned Jane not to push her luck. Jane used the facilities, returned quickly, and told Matt she could have managed alone. He said he simply did not want to leave her by herself and that he always wanted to protect her. Jane was quietly touched. Back in her room, Jane sat thinking, what was really happening in this school? Why was it happening? Who had built it? Who is S? And why did everyone fear him? Her thoughts swirled until she remembered Nikki's words, that she would have to find the truth herself or break the rules. She debated whether to go out before Bloody Night began or stay and do nothing. While she was still deciding, 7 o'clock struck. The alarm sounded. Bloody Night had started. She ran out to find Matt, and he grabbed her and pulled her into hiding just as boys in black masks swept through the corridor. The two ran together, narrowly escaping group after group of attackers. They fought back when cornered. Then one of the masked boys drove a nail into Matt's leg. Despite the injury, they kept running and eventually barricaded themselves inside a large box, which turned out to be a garbage bin. Romantic in its own way. Jane told Matt this was their chance to uncover the truth about the university. Matt said she was out of her mind. They had barely survived. Jane insisted insisted that finding the truth was the only way to find an exit. Matt begged her not to do anything reckless, reminding her of the body they had seen. He said he would tell her everything he knew, but first they needed to get back to the hostel. Jane agreed. They climbed out of the garbage bin, dignity largely intact, but Matt's leg was badly injured. He could barely walk and told Jane to run and save herself. Jane refused to leave him. He began to fade in and out of consciousness, blood pouring from his leg. Jane was in tears. Then a crowd surrounded them. Jane screamed at them, pleading for them to leave her friends alone. Just then, a boy in a red mask appeared, and everyone immediately scattered. The red-masked boy lifted Matt onto his back and carried him, with Jane following closely behind. Back at the hostel, the others had been barricading the door as usual. Jerome was frantic with worry. Dem told him to stay calm but agreed that Jane and Matt were out there, and they needed to come back. Mia voiced what everyone feared, that they might already be dead. Jerome was horrified that she would say that. She admitted she was not thinking clearly. She was terrified. People were killing each other outside and all she wanted was for everyone to survive the night. Then, just in time, Jane and Matt arrived with the red-masked boy. Everyone moved the barricade and opened the door. While they tended to Matt, they demanded to know what had happened. Jane explained that the black gang had found them and driven a nail through Matt's foot. She noted the nail was small, but that Matt looked as though he were dying. The red-masked boy explained that the nail was coated in poison and instructed them to clean the wound with hot water. He produced an injection, administered it, and said if Matt was strong enough, he would survive. Jane held Matt's hand and told him they were safe and that she believed in him. When she looked up, the boy in the red mask had vanished. They were stunned. We then see the boy remove his mask. He was Race Sylvania, leader of the Demon God Gang, with a distinctive red left eye. The next morning, Jane apologized to her friends for putting them in danger, and everyone went to class together. When Matt regained consciousness, Jane was overjoyed. He then immediately began eating an alarming number of chili peppers. Jane stared at him and asked if he had lost his mind. Matt said capsaicin would help flush the poison from his body, a claim that is medically questionable but delivered with complete conviction. Jane hit him in exasperation. They bickered, and then Matt thanked her sincerely for not leaving him even when things were at their worst. Jane apologized for putting him in danger in the first place. Matt said that right before he fainted, he had seen the boy in the red mask, different from all the others in black. He theorized the boy must be Race Sylvania, the leader of the Demon God Gang. Jane asked why he had helped them. Matt admitted he did not know. Jane said they would figure it out later, and they hurried to class. On the way, a frightened girl bumped into them and then rushed off before Jane could ask what was wrong. In class, their teacher, whose name was Miss Cat, announced that an engagement party would be held in a few days. Nobody seemed particularly enthusiastic. A girl named Celine said it was hardly the right time to celebrate given how many students had died in recent weeks. Miss Cat said the decision had been made by Madame Violet and the party would proceed that Friday. Celine pressed her on whether she had any power to stop it, but Miss Cat cut her off before she could finish. Jerome noticed the exchange and thought to himself, whoever you are behind all of this. He declared silently that he and his friends would not be intimidated by the Black Gang, the Demon God Gang, or anyone else. Bold words for someone who had just hidden in a rubbish bin. Over lunch, Jerome told the group they needed to stop reacting and start investigating. They had entered the university without knowing anything about its history and now needed to gather information if they ever hoped to fight back and escape. They all agreed. Jane suggested that Celine from their class might know something useful and proposed bringing her into their confidence. She approached Celine and said she meant no harm and simply wanted to talk. Nikki spotted them and began following. Celine led Jane to a quiet, isolated area and asked her first, was she willing to risk her life for information? Jane said yes. Celine said the new students from the previous year had also been brave and curious, but warned her that asking questions was easy. Accepting the answers was not. Jane said she was prepared. Celine began. Hell University had once been called Philippine High University, an elite institution for wealthy and powerful students. Everything changed when its founder, Dr. Quezon, began to lose his grip on his own humanity. He was a brilliant and well-regarded scientist, but he started diverting the school's enormous tuition funds toward his private research. Obsessed with achieving immortality, he turned the school into a laboratory and began using the students as subjects. He was working on a formula, an immortality potion. Then one day, all exits from the university were sealed without warning. The school was cut off from the rest of the Philippines. The students were effectively removed from the outside world, and nobody, not their parents, not the government, could reach them or even find them. Celine was one of the original students trapped in that first lockdown. With no way out and the experiments continuing, students began turning on each other. Some fought to defend themselves, others rebelled, and gradually, the violence became the culture. Philippine High University became Hell University, and two factions emerged from the chaos. Dr. Kason was rumored to have eventually succeeded in creating his formula. However, he was killed before he could use it on himself. One student reportedly found the formula and hid it. That student is believed to still be somewhere within Hell University. That is why the school has been hidden from the world. Powerful forces from outside are searching for the formula and will stop at nothing to get it. Then, without warning, something shifted in Celine's demeanor. She smiled strangely and said that the person holding the formula was in danger, and that now Jane was in danger too, because she knew the secret of Hell University and would therefore die here. She laughed and walked away, leaving Jane stunned. Jane thought, so that is why information is called a weapon. But now what? Before she could decide anything, Nikki appeared and grabbed her, saying that Celine's story was only half the truth, and that Jane was going to die first for meddling where she should not. When Jane returned to her friends, they told her that the school librarian, Leonora, had warned them that seeking information about the university carried a permanent punishment. She had given them a note telling them to stop investigating and to focus instead on escaping. When they asked how, she told them to increase their rank. Everyone was confused until they were shown a leaderboard, a ranking system that covered not just academic standing, but standing within Hell University as a whole. Ray Sylvania currently held the top position. The group scanned the list, and at number 3 found a name they suspected was the leader of the Black Gang. Vanessa concluded that chasing the ranking system was far safer than continuing to investigate. They could simply perform well, rise to the top, and hopefully find a way out. Mia asked Jane what Celine had told her. Jane chose not to share what she knew, unwilling to put her friends in further danger. Soon after, two boys started brawling near the decorations for the upcoming party event. The principal witnessed it and said nothing. S stepped in and stopped the fight himself. The principal then took the stage to announce that this Friday's event would be a masquerade ball. Everyone must wear a mask, but black and red masks were strictly forbidden, as those colors belonged to the Demon God Gang and the Black Gang respectively. That night would also be designated Bloody Night Free. No killing would be permitted, and anyone who violated this rule would face the death penalty. S was then called forward to make additional announcements. He told everyone he would not be participating personally, but warned that he would be watching everyone closely. Jerome later noticed a posted announcement that S was seeking a new SSG secretary, meaning Freezy had been removed from her position. Freezy herself arrived at that moment and confronted Jane in the corridor, insisting she was still the secretary. Jane calmly pointed out that the notice said otherwise and that she had already been removed. Freezy tore the notice and threw the pieces at Jane's face. Freezy then grabbed Jane by the hair and began slamming her head against the wall until blood appeared. Anil appeared and seized Freezy, furious, warning that insulting S's secretary was the same as insulting all of them. Jane, unimpressed, looked him in the eye and said she did not care about his threats. Anil threatened to use all his power to destroy her. Jane replied that he was welcome to try, but it would not change what Freezy was. Anil moved to strike her, but S appeared and grabbed his hand, pushing him back. S warned them both that touching his secretary again would be a third warning for each of them. As everyone cleared the area, S caught Jane as she stumbled. Jane told him to go ahead and kill her. S said, "Not now. You need to recover first." He then carried her to the medical room and instructed the nurse to ensure there was not a single mark left on his secretary's forehead. As he turned to leave, Jane called after him, "I have not said yes to the secretary position yet." S ignored her and walked out. It appeared she had been appointed regardless of her consent. After sleeping for a long time, Jane woke to find her friends gathered around her. They told her that S was reportedly the one who had hurt her, that the whole school knew about it. Jane asked if they would rather believe gossip or her. She explained that it was Anil who had nearly hit her, following a confrontation with Freezy, and that S had stepped in and brought her here. Without him, the outcome would have been far worse. Just then, Anil walked into the room, dropped to his knees in front of Jane, and began begging for forgiveness. Everyone was stunned. He was nearly in tears, saying he did not want to die. Jane forgave him and told him to leave. Her friends asked why the vice president had just humiliated himself before her. Jane said not to worry about it. Then the evening of the engagement party arrived. Everyone dressed up and chose their masks. Jane and her group put on their disguises and attended. Jane remarked it felt like a normal school for once. The boys told the girls to be careful even though Bloody Night was suspended. Trust no one. Mia spotted the red-haired boy at the party and pointed him out to the others. Gang members arrived wearing their black and red masks respectively. Freezy appeared as host of the evening and praised the crowd lavishly before insulting the new students, specifically Jane's group, in front of everyone. Classy. The principal then took the stage and officially opened the party. Race turned on the music and everyone began to enjoy themselves. Anil found Jane and congratulated her on her appointment as secretary, noting she had already secured 9th place on the top 10 ranking list. The rest rest of the group were pleased for her, but Matt said privately that she should not accept it, reminding her that in Hell University, trust was not a luxury anyone could afford. The others told Matt to let Jane decide for herself. Confused and frustrated, Jane walked off and began drinking with Dave. She did not realize how strong the drinks were until her head began to spin. A boy in a black mask approached her and whispered that accepting the secretary position meant she would one day have to take a knife in her hands, but that someone had already saved her once and would not always be there to do so. Jane turned to grab him, but he had gone. She grabbed a passing stranger instead, asking who the boy was. By then, Dave had collapsed. Matt immediately remembered that Jane had also been drinking and went to find her urgently. Jane had already fainted. The principal went on stage and told everyone not to let one unconscious person ruin the party, a sentence that reveals a great deal about this school's approach to student welfare. Vanessa began yelling at the principal. The nurse informed them that both Dave and Jane had been given a highly potent drug with poison in it. Dave should recover normally, but Jane's body was reacting very differently and far more severely, despite the fact that Dave had consumed significantly more than she had. They asked for medicine. The nurse said the doctor was busy and walked away. Matt was furious, knowing that without immediate treatment, Jane might die. Then from outside, a figure wrapped in a red cloak threw a small package of medicine through the window into the medical room. A note was attached, instructing them to give it to Jane immediately. They hesitated, uncertain whether to trust it, but Matt reasoned that they had no other option. If they did nothing, she would die anyway. Jerome agreed. They administered the medicine to both Jane and Dave. Meanwhile, S was leaving the party when the principal approached and made a casual comment about the lack of bloodshed that evening. S replied pointedly by referencing what had just happened and left. Despite the medicine, neither Jane nor Dave was recovering. Then the girl in the red cloak entered the medical room herself. They asked who she was. She said she was not their enemy. She made a small incision on Jane's chest, then asked them to give Jane the medicine again. Matt administered it a second time. Jane regained consciousness. The girl explained that the medicine needed to be given while the patient was awake. The first dose had failed because Jane was unconscious, so the incision had been necessary to rouse her. She then vanished without another word. The next morning, both Jane and Dave had made a complete recovery, to everyone's astonishment. Vanessa asked in disbelief if they were truly all right. They said they felt better than ever. Jane then asked who the mysterious girl had been. Before anyone could answer, the teacher arrived for gym class. Afterward, Celine approached Jane again and warned her not to trust anyone, not even her friends. Jane, irritated, walked away. She then spotted the same mysterious girl from before, clearly frightened, and began following her. Matt, Jerome, and Dave noticed Jane leaving and followed after her. When Jane found the girl and opened a door, she screamed at what she saw and vomited. The student government administration arrived and dispersed the crowd, then asked Jane to accompany them. Her friends protested her innocence. The admin said they only wanted to speak with her. Jane was brought to an office where S was already present, seated with the casual authority of someone who knew exactly how much power he held. Seeing how afraid the admin was of him, Jane wondered privately why. S told her to sit. Jane immediately said she had nothing to do with what had happened to that girl. S told her she was rude and asked if she was forgetting who she was sitting in front of. He said he had called her there to discuss the SSG secretary position. Jane said she had already told him she was not interested. S said he had not asked for her opinion and that she had been chosen. End of discussion. Jane pushed back. S listed the advantages: access to information, authority, and the fear of others. Jane said she would think about it. Asked Dame Haters, have Racine recovering from the previous night? Jane said a lot had happened and she had class to get to. As she stood to leave, S said quietly that he knew who had poisoned her and that she probably already knew too but was refusing to accept it, and that she should follow her heart. Jane then went to class, where her physics teacher asked to speak with her privately afterward. The teacher revealed that she was actually an undercover detective and secret agent investigating Hell University. Her team had been monitoring the school for a long time, but had been unable to obtain sufficient information, as the school operated entirely outside government jurisdiction. She had been embedded there for a month but was stuck. She needed Jane's help. Jane said she was just an ordinary student and had nothing to offer. The teacher said Jane could be their most valuable asset if she accepted S's offer and became SSG secretary. In that role, she would have access to a secret laboratory where Dr. Kayson's immortality research had been conducted. The teacher then revealed that Dr. Kayson had not died naturally. He had been murdered so that his formula could be taken. A copy existed, but it was incomplete. Before his death, Dr. Kayson had hidden the remaining ingredients with a chosen student and had never revealed that student's identity. Powerful external organizations were now searching for the lab and the formula. The teacher needed Jane to find the lab before those forces succeeded. Jane said she could not trust her and left. Back with her her friends, Vanessa bombarded Jane with questions about where she had been and whether she had been hurt. Jane reassured her and then quietly began researching ways to escape, reading every book she could find. Matt said it was pointless. If there were a way out, someone would have found it by now. Jane asked if that meant they should just give up. Matt said no, reminding her they had promised to escape together. Jane held his hand and thanked him for standing by her. Matt promised he would always be there, no matter what. Jane smiled. Matt kissed her hand. At that moment, all the books fell off the shelf. They looked around. S was there, watching. He looked extremely displeased by what he had just witnessed. He left. The group assumed it had been a small earthquake. They had no idea. Then, bloody night began again. As screams echoed outside, Jane turned everything over in her mind. The secretary position, the undercover mission, the gangs, the formula. If she agreed to S's offer, she would gain power and information. But she could not be certain his intentions were good. And the secret agent was asking for her help. But could she be trusted either? Was everyone simply using her? She felt utterly lost. The next morning, the school grounds were being cleaned of the previous night's aftermath, as if it were merely a regular housekeeping task. Then Jane made a decision. She went to S. She accepted his offer. S aimed her a new uniform. She took it and turned to leave. S asked where she was going. She said to the bathroom to change. S told her she had to change right there, in front of him. Jane gave him a look that could have frozen fire, and told him to stop dreaming. Ish smiled, stepped outside the door, and stood guard while she changed, which, to his credit, was marginally better behavior than the alternative. Jane, alone for a moment, admitted to herself that she was not falling for any of his charm. He was still a devil, but she had made her choice. Her friends discussed what this might mean. If Jane became secretary, she would gain access to information that could help them all. But Mia worried about what it would mean for Jane. Power was a dangerous thing, and it could turn friends into enemies. Matt said Jane was not that kind of person, though he remained deeply wary of S, and made a joke about Matt clearly being jealous of the man, which everyone laughed at. When Jane emerged in her new uniform, S looked at her for a moment, and told her she looked very beautiful. When Jane and S arrived at class together, her classmates were visibly shocked. Some made fun of her at first, but when they realized she had genuinely become the SSG secretary, the tone shifted quickly, and apologies followed. Jane's manner had changed too. She told everyone coolly to clear her path, then dismissed even her own friends and walked away with S. Her friends stood there stunned, wondering who exactly this new Jane was, and that is where episode 4 ends.